justice for all Americans. Mr. Cosby's conviction being overturned is for the world and all Americans who are being treated unfairly by the judicial system.
Bill Cosby will spend his first night at his home in about 3 years. His estate is located outside of Philadelphia in Elkins Park. Today, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court vacated his sexual assault conviction. Today's ruling was based on the fact that the prosecutor who brought the case was bound by his predecessor's agreement not to charge Cosby. And tonight, for the first time since its release, the words of Bill Cosby himself. About 30 minutes ago, he tweeted this: "I have never changed my stance nor my story. I have always maintained my innocence. Thank you to all my fans, supporters, and friends who stood by me through this ordeal. Special thanks to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for upholding the rule of law. Hashtag Bill Cosby." And good evening and welcome to this special hour of BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones in for Laverne McGee. BNC has live team coverage on this. We have BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil, at the helm of our legal panel. BNC's Anita Bennett is live at the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where Bill Cosby has a Hollywood star. BNC's Jimmy Marlowe is in the studio with social media reaction, but we begin tonight with BNC correspondent Dre Clark live outside of Cosby's house. Dre, good evening.
And his children, and obviously this has been a hard 3 years for this entire family.
Today's decision is the latest chapter in the legal saga that started in 2005. Here's a look at the timeline of how one of the biggest names in entertainment wound up behind bars and eventually freed. Bill Cosby, born William Henry Cosby. He was an American former stand-up comedian, actor, and author who held an active career for more than 6 decades. Cosby, once America's dad, started his career as a stand-up comic in San Francisco in the 1960s. In 2015, Cosby was arrested and charged for drugging and molesting a Temple University employee at his home outside of Philadelphia. The arrest came days before the 12-year statute of limitations expired. In 2018, he was convicted. Cosby was the first celebrity tried and convicted in the Me Too era. In May, Cosby was denied parole after refusing to participate in sex offender programs during his nearly 3 years in state prison. This is the first year he was eligible for parole under his sentence. And Cosby's first trial for aggravated indecent assault ended with a deadlocked jury. Now lawyers for the accusers are again pivoting their strategy of how to get justice of their clients. BNC spoke with attorney for the victims, Gloria Allred. Here's part of what she had to say.
And despite the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision, I want everyone to know that I do believe that this was a very important fight for justice. And even though the court did overturn the conviction, it was on technical grounds. It did not vindicate Bill Cosby's conduct, and it should not be interpreted as a statement or a finding that he did not engage in the acts of which he has been accused. Is this a blow to the Me Too movement? It's not a win, but it's certainly a moment in which we all understand that it's a long road to justice. And, you know, there are many roadblocks on the way. The justice system is not perfect. Laws are not perfect. Judges don't always make the right decisions. Prosecutors don't always make the right decisions. Lawyers don't always make the right decision. But because it's imperfect, that's not a reason to decide not to participate in it. Many, many victims will continue to have the courage to come forward and to file civil lawsuits against those who sexually assault or rape them.
And here is a statement by Andrea Castan regarding the Cosby decision. It reads, "Today's majority decision regarding Bill Cosby is not only disappointing but of concern in that it may discourage those who seek justice for sexual assault in the criminal justice system from reporting or participating in the prosecution of assailant, or may force a victim to choose between filing either a criminal or civil action." So let's bring in someone who actually knows Bill Cosby very well. Ebony Benson, she was Bill Cosby's publicist throughout his trial. She eventually went to write a book called The Kill a Legacy, The Bill Cosby Trial. Welcome, Ebony, to BNC.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, Ebony, we know it's a big day for all of you, so let's go back a little bit. Give us a brief timeline. When was Mr. Cosby charged, convicted, and in prison, and when did you enter the picture as his publicist?
The charges originally came down, as you said, right at the 11th hour, right when the statute of limitation was about to be up in Andrea Constand's case. At that time, the charges were filed, and he eventually went to trial in 2017. That is actually when I joined the team. It was a little bit before he went to trial. It was in between jury selections and the trial when I joined the team. I stayed with him all throughout that trial, the second trial, sentencing, and eventually went to see him while he was in prison in Pennsylvania. It's been a long road. It started even before I got there. There have been so many changes. Attorneys and things like that had changed, but this began for him back in 2005 when things just started to amp up for him in regards to Andrea Constand and her case.
And the obvious question here, he's maintained his innocence all throughout this time. You know, many people ask, is he guilty as charged and convicted? And what made you reach that opinion?
For me, it was about integrity. When I joined the team, I knew that I would have to go into the courtroom and listen for myself, see with my own eyes. And based on the evidence that I saw, based on what the prosecution was presenting, I did not feel that Bill Cosby was guilty. And at that point, I decided to remain on the team based on that. He's always maintained his innocence. I've always believed in it. He's never folded. And my stance has never changed.
And let me ask you this. I have a list here. I'll show you this. It's a complete list of 60 of those accusers who accused him of sexual assault. When you look at this and so many of those people at home tonight wondering how this has happened, what's your reaction to what they may be thinking about this at this time?
I can't speak on what they may be thinking. My advocacy was for Bill Cosby throughout his fight for his freedom and for his justice. So to be honest, I can't speak to what they would be thinking or how they would be feeling.
Was it ever hard for you to maintain kind of some positive image for Bill Cosby as you were doing that job?
Absolutely. I spoke about that in an interview earlier. Sometimes when you are a part of the unpopular team or the unpopular, you have an unpopular opinion about things, it is a bit hard. But throughout that entire time, there was always support from many of his supporters, many of his fans, many people in my own personal life. So I felt encouraged to continue.
And what was your reaction when you heard today? We saw the press conference. We saw him with a bright smile on his face, excited, people embracing him. What was your reaction?
I know I'm not as excited as he is, or Mrs. Cosby, or his family, and especially his appeal team. But I am overwhelmed. I'm ecstatic. When you have believed in something for so long and stood by it, and to see it unfold in this way, it's huge. It's a big victory. It's a big win for Bill Cosby, and I'm excited for him. I'm happy for him.
And Ebony, I have to ask you, because we're never afraid to ask the tough questions, right? When you think about how much has gone down with this particular case, and so many people on the other end of things saying, you know what, he's guilty, he hurt me. How do you still maintain that you can help fight somebody, show that they're innocent when so many people are saying that he's guilty? And are you ever afraid of how people may say it reflects on you?
Absolutely not. This trial was fought in the court of law, not the court of public opinion. And if we are going to trust in this system and trust and believe in it, then that's something I stand on. I heard many people say today that the technicality is the reason that he's out. But to be honest, the technicality is why he should have never been brought to trial in the first place.
And Ebony, when is the last time you actually saw or spoke to Mr. Cosby?
I haven't seen him since he was originally taken to Phoenix back in 2018. I went to visit him once, and then at that point I separated from the team to work on some other things, and I never stopped advocating for him, as why we have To Kill a Legacy, the Bill Cosby Trials, which is my book that will be coming out soon, that details my experience and everything that I saw and why I believe so heavily in his innocence.
And any last message you want to send to our viewers who are having a hard time trying to grasp the concept of how this happened today? Any message specifically because you knew him, you know his character?
I would just, again, encourage people to look deeper into the testimony, look deeper into the law. I can't speak for people's feelings, and I don't even want to attempt to. Again, right now, I just want to celebrate this big win for Mr. Cosby and his team and his family.
Ebony Benson, thank you so much for being here, sharing your truth and sharing your side of the story. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. We want to go back to our BNC correspondent, Dre Clark. We were having a little bit of issues earlier, but Dre is live outside of Cosby's house in Elkins Park. He's been there all afternoon. Dre, good evening.
Brittany, good evening to you. America's dad, as he was once called, Bill Cosby, will sleep in his own bed tonight, the first time he's done so in 3 years since he was placed. Now, Bill Cosby cannot be retried on any of these charges, so the 83-year-old, for all intents and purposes, is legally now free and clear. However, outside his home, there were also some protesters who say they believe that Mr. Cosby, despite what the state Supreme Court has decided and despite what he says, they believe he is guilty. And there were some people who also stood alongside those who were here in support of Bill Cosby, who raised their voices saying that they actually believe that he's in prison. One person we did not see today was Camille Cosby, Bill Cosby's wife. However, his legal team made it very clear that it was Camille Cosby that orchestrated this legal team. She was leading the team and giving them ideas on what they could do to help get her husband out of prison. They say she played a key part, although we have not seen her. We now know that Mr. Cosby, again, is home with his children, with his wife. The question was also asked of his legal team, do they plan to now sue the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office? They say everything is on the table at this point, but right now, they just want to make sure Mr. Cosby is home, comfortable, and at some point in time, they will meet to decide on where they will go from here, what they will do next legally. Brittany?
Thanks for that update. Dre Clark, live for us outside of Bill Cosby's house. Dre, thank you. We want to come back. When we come back, a legal breakdown about today's court decision that shocked a lot of people and resulted in Bill Cosby's release from prison. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, I'm glad he got some time served. I really am. But if you think, I believe it's more than 60 or 70 women in total have accused him. He got to have a good long life of wealth and privilege before he was held accountable for his crimes. So it was only a very tiny, tiny measure of the justice that he should have received.
And that's reaction earlier today from Lisa Bloom, who represented at least 3 of the women who brought accusations against Bill Cosby. Today, a Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his sexual assault conviction. Now, let's get to our legal panel for an in-depth breakdown of Cosby's release. Joining me now, BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil. Attorney Terry Austin in New York. She's a former trial attorney and former advisor to New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and attorney Larry Taylor in Dallas, Texas, who represents the Cochran firm. Thank you, all of you, for joining us tonight to talk about this very, very important story and shocking story, if I may add. And so tonight we'll begin with Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura, Cosby's release comes after the court ruled his rights were violated. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, essentially the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the conviction because they said that Bill Cosby's due process rights were violated. Now, essentially the reasoning is there was a prosecutorial agreement that was made with the DA prior to the one that actually prosecuted Bill Cosby. And that agreement said if Bill Cosby participated in the civil process that was against him, that no criminal charges would be pursued. The new DA changed his mind and said, no, I think we're going to pursue these charges. And so Bill Cosby made a lot of incriminating statements on the basis of legal immunity that he thought he had based on that agreement. And today the court simply said that is not fair. It violates his constitutional due process and overturned the conviction.
And Terry, I want to go to you next because this is a big question. Everybody wants to know what happens next. And is there any other legal recourse for Cosby's accusers? His attorneys say it's over, but is it?
Well, it's almost over. I think that with this decision, clearly there can be no other action in connection with Andrea Constance. But, I mean, there could be actions as far as the other 50-plus women are concerned if the statute of limitations has not expired in their cases. This court just decided this one case, and in fact, it was a procedural decision. It did not decide any substance here. So there is a possibility that other claims can be made, but it is a very slim possibility just based on the time that has expired so far.
And Terry, just a quick follow-up for you. Could Cosby's release impact other Me Too cases like Harvey Weinstein?
Well, it could. I mean, they could certainly cite to it. We know that Weinstein is appealing his conviction, and he is also facing other charges. So we certainly could see that his lawyers will cite to this case. And we know that there were prior bad acts in both Weinstein and Cosby. And so we could see that there might be some influence as far as that is concerned. So it might just very well have an effect on the Weinstein case and any other big profile cases like this, particularly where there have been prior bad acts introduced into the case.
I'm already seeing reports too that his attorneys right now are already praising this decision, so I'm sure something is sure to come. And so, Larry, I want to ask you a question. Is this overturned conviction basically based off an agreement, a get out of jail free card? And if so, how many other cases could be overturned in the future?
To take a look back at the beginning of this case, the major objection was the deposition videos and all the testimony from that civil case that was brought in. Even the former prosecutor said that, he made the agreement and that information shouldn't come in. And so what it shows is that the office is more than just an individual. If someone in that office makes an agreement, it must be upheld. Because of that agreement, Mr. Cosby gave up his Fifth Amendment right for self-incrimination. And so because of that, that is the pivotal point of this case, in conjunction with some of the things that happened after the first trial. The first trial, you had 2 victims come forward. Well, the second go around, you had 5. And so anytime a trial court changes a court's demeanor or the playbook because of a hung jury, it brings about issues with the next trial because any good attorney would object. And I'm saying this as someone who has both been a prosecutor and someone who actually represents victims of sexual assault cases.
And Larry, we're going to take a quick pause here and bring you all back in just a few moments. When we come back, a landmark location on the West Coast where Cosby's career was enshrined in what was supposed to be an eternal tribute. We're live in Hollywood with the Walk of Fame that's ahead. Stay with us. Welcome back to the special hour of BNC Live. Let's go to our Anita Bennett in Hollywood at Bill Cosby's star on the Walk of Fame. Anita, what is the reaction out there right now?
Well, Brittany, Hollywood insiders and some of Bill Cosby's longtime fans are sharing their thoughts, and I have to tell you, everyone we talked to out here on the boulevard, well, they said they support today's decision. Take a listen.
I'm glad that he's free now. I was very disappointed when he was arrested and tried and found guilty.
He's old and he made a mistake, so he has he deserves a chance to do it over again. And
the group for sexual assault survivors, well, they are very unhappy. They released a statement a short time ago calling Cosby's release, quote, a travesty and an injustice. Reporting live from Hollywood Boulevard, I'm Anita Bennett. Back to you.
Anita, live for us. Anita, thank you. But when we come back, the legal eagle who's become an icon for victims in Hollywood and elsewhere. It's Gloria Allred, and BNC poses our own questions to her about the Cosby accusers she represented.
He just said his heart was racing. He couldn't believe it. He said they was ringing his cell. They was just knocking on the walls, the inmates. And he said, they said, look, you're free. Get up, get up. And he was like, what are these guys talking about? And he was just so excited. And when I pulled in the bottom of the prison, they wheeled him out in a wheelchair. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to continue to talk to the officers about their children and their family.
I did have an opportunity to speak to one of my clients who testified in the second criminal case, Janice Baker Kinney, and she said she was stunned by the decision. She is still processing it, and she and I will be speaking out tomorrow.
And here are the faces of some of Bill Cosby's accusers. 35 of the 60 accusers were featured on the 2015 cover of New York Magazine. And we want to go back out to BNC's correspondent Dre Clark. He is live outside of Cosby's house in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Dre, what's the latest?
Well, Brittany, I just talked to Andrew Wyatt, who is Bill Cosby's spokesperson. He's the gentleman you oftentimes would see walking alongside him when he was going into the courtroom, and certainly he was there today. He actually drove Bill Cosby home from prison. He says right now Mr. Cosby is inside his home resting here. It's been a very long day, but certainly after word came down that Bill Cosby was going to be released from prison, it surprised a lot of people, and almost immediately cameras and neighbors and curious people surrounded his estate here outside Philadelphia, hoping to catch a glimpse of Bill Cosby. And just a few hours after he arrived here at home, he did come outside with his legal team to meet with Mr. and Mrs. Cosby to determine what they should do legally. Brittany?
All right, Dre Clark, BNC's Dre Clark live for us outside of Bill Cosby's home. Dre, thank you. And let's go back to our legal panel now to break down Cosby's release and what happens next. Dr. Laura, Terry, and Larry, thank you again for joining us here. Dr. Laura, we're going to start with you. The conviction was tossed because of an agreement with a former DA not to charge Cosby. Are these kinds of agreements normal? Are they usually binding like this?
So, Brittany, very surprising that the DA made this agreement, because typically a district attorney is supposed to be an attorney for the Commonwealth, for the people, and he should not be scapegoating or sidestepping opportunities to hold someone accountable and bring criminal charges when there's enough evidence to support it. So these agreements are binding when they're made, but typically they're in writing, and that's what makes this case unique. There was no agreement made in writing. This was an oral agreement. I did see in the opinion that at some point in time that former DA that made this agreement signed a press release with respect to the acknowledging the agreement. But again, very unique set of circumstances, definitely not common to have, again, a DA forego criminal charges in cooperation for the civil charges that were filed.
And Larry, let's go back to you if you're still there. Pennsylvania Supreme Court judges ruled testimony from other accusers may have tainted the case. We've seen similar testimony in other trials like Harvey Weinstein's, who I mentioned earlier. Does today's release impact those cases?
I don't know if they really impact those other cases. This particular case was unique in itself. Like I stated earlier, a large part of it had to do with that agreement. And prosecutors sometimes are approached by attorneys from civil cases in which agreements are made with the victims as well as the accused to potentially allow something to happen and move forward in the civil court. And so those agreements usually are binding, and in this case, I agree with the Supreme Court that these charges should have never been brought forward. But I don't think that they're going to have a lasting effect on any other cases because, like I said before, this is a very unique situation.
And Terry, let's get you to weigh in on this. The DA released a statement saying he hopes today's release does not prevent other people from coming forward with sex assault allegations. That's what everyone is concerned about at this point. Does this hurt future accusers?
Well, I do think it's very difficult for victims to come and testify in court or even to mention that they've been assaulted. There's been lots of studies about women and how difficult it is to admit that you may have been in a situation, you feel the guilt. And so many women who are victims like this, and men as well, might not come forward, and then the statute of limitations does run. And so I think that this decision might make it more difficult for these individuals to come forward. They're going to see that these cases, even when there is a conviction, is going to be appealed, and that the appeal process may indeed succeed. So I definitely think, to answer your question, that it will make it more difficult for victims to come forth. I also hope that prosecutors think twice about how they bring these cases so that the cases aren't vacated and that convictions will actually stand.
Good point there. And Dr. Laura, what kind of message does Cosby's release send to other women who may be considering pursuing charges against their attackers?
You know, unfortunately, it's going to have a chilling effect. It sends a very powerful message that the justice system is not going to be there to help them. The justice system is not going to help them litigate cases where they've been sexually assaulted. I think a lot of women, to be quite frank, Brittany, they're going to be discouraged and say, why bother? Why come out publicly? Why face the embarrassment of admitting that I was in this situation, that I was a victim of a sexual assault, a sexual crime? And that's really unfortunate, because one of the significant things about this case is it really helped promote, or propel rather, the Me Too movement, and really encouraging women to speak up and not be silenced.
And Larry, let me ask you this. Do you see any civil cases coming forward from those accusers after all of this, since he's now released?
I think so. I think that in any jurisdiction that he's accused of that the statute of limitations have not run, I believe that those accusers could bring forth cases. And I hope and pray that this court decision does not stop anyone who was assaulted or is a victim of sexual assault from coming forward and bringing forth charges. This case, I hope they understand that this case was unique in itself, and that they continue to seek justice when wrong.
And Larry, let me follow up for you. You're a prosecutor in this case, for instance, in Pennsylvania. Would you appeal today's decision?
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be real difficult. And Ms. Jones, I'll just put an example like this. You and I have an agreement. You don't want it to be public. Mm-hmm. We make the agreement. You and I go our separate ways. And, you know, the good doctor comes back and says that she wants to see what our agreement was about, what was in it. And it could be damaging information, whether damaging information for yourself or for me. And the court said today that that agreement between us is private. And so you don't want to open up those can of worms in having people undo agreements such as the one. But if, as a prosecutor, just depending on the victim at hand, we don't know what the victim in the case in which this agreement was made was going through. And so I think the prosecutor at that particular time made a decision based on the facts in front of him.
And Dr. Laura, many people asking that question, we spoke about this earlier, but is it legal to do something like this? Because before today, many people hadn't heard that something like this could happen, that you could have those type of agreements. Yeah, so prosecutors can make agreements with defendants. What makes this one questionable or makes us pause is the fact that typically the agreements are for things like a plea deal, like we see in the Chauvin case. So you're making a plea deal for a lesser sentence or some other accommodations, but not a deal not to prosecute in exchange for supporting the civil process. Typically, prosecutors don't get that involved in the civil side of things. They stick to the criminal charges that could be filed and how to pursue those charges. And again, very unique, narrow circumstances in this case, definitely not the norm. And Terry, this one's for you. Do you think the prosecuting attorney cut corners in this case? And under what circumstances does the attorney not be privy to this deal that could upend a conviction?
Well, I do think that the former prosecutor should not have made prosecutorial agreement, and it wasn't in writing, and just at the press conference, Bruce Castor mentioned that there was this deal, and the court did say that Bill Cosby relied on that. So I think that the problem with the prosecution started even before the current team. The former prosecutor should have never made that deal. And as far as the current team is concerned, they should have thought about the fact that bringing these charges under these circumstances could result in a conviction, but it could result in that conviction being vacated. And again, I'm hoping that this decision will make prosecutors think twice about the types of cases they bring, making sure that the basis and the foundation for that particular case is solid. And to Dr. Laura's point, they should have not mixed, the former prosecutor should not have mixed the civil with the criminal. They're supposed to be focusing on the criminal case and protecting the people of the state. And instead, they made this deal. There was a settlement, and Andrea Costans received $3.38 million. And so, you know, you have to wonder what was going on with the former prosecution, and you have to wonder what was the current prosecution thinking.
And I'm seeing reports calling him an evil rapist. This is in reaction to today's decision. So you got to think about what's to come in terms of would there be any slander lawsuits now that he has been, the charges have been overturned at this point. Larry, you want to take that one?
You know, I don't see Mr. Cosby's team really taking that route. I mean, I think right now being released is enough. There's already going to be issues in regard to that, and it's going to be kind of difficult to prove. Even though the case was, the conviction was overturned, he still was convicted, and so I just don't see them going that route.
And Dr. Laura, I mean, looking at, you know, we heard what he's doing now. They got him ready to get arrested at this point. Where do we see this case going from here?
Well, one thing about the opinion, the court was very blunt and direct in saying that they barred any future prosecution. And so in terms of him being chased down by the DA for possible charges with respect to this particular set of facts, it's not going to happen. And so for Bill Cosby, this is a new chapter in his life, and he's able to live his life. He's a free man, and moving forward, the world is his. I mean, this situation is over in terms of this specific plaintiff and the facts in this particular case.
I think it'd definitely be something to be talked about for many, many years. Well, BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil, attorney Terry Austin in New York, and also Larry, thank you so much for weighing in on this very, very important story today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brittany.
And you could probably imagine that social media has been blowing up since Cosby's release from prison today. Next, we'll do a deep dive into what people are saying about today's big news. That's ahead.
Response from the White House to that announcement. I will say, which you touched on, and I'll just use the opportunity to reiterate, that the president has long been an advocate for fighting against violence against women, for ensuring that we are raising the voices and the stories of people who have been survivors of sexual assault. That's something he has done throughout his career and will continue to do, but I don't have a specific comment on that announcement today. If we do have one after the briefing, I'll make that available to all of you.
Tonight, even the White House reacting to a Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision to vacate Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction. Now, while many have taken a middle-of-the-road approach, backlash against Bill Cosby on social media, it has been intense, folks. BNC's Jimmy Marlowe has been watching very closely, and he joins me with the details. Jimmy, what are folks saying?
The court of public opinion is laying into Bill Cosby and anyone that supports his release from prison, Brittany. Now, the overall reaction is a loud, emphatic, resounding no from most people. Not only is it the trending topic right now, it's also got some interesting conversations going on in the comments section as everyone is really trying to understand the technicalities involved here. Here are a few that caught my eye. First of all, let's take a look at of the verdict first, and Bill Cosby being seen driving home in that white car to his bed to sleep tonight and eat dinner and be normal like the rest of us instead of, staying in jail. Brittany?
We know people are always sounding off on social media. Jimmy, thank you. Well, up next, we check in live at the Cosby estate just outside of Philadelphia. Stick around. Our Drake Clark is next. We're back live on the latest on Bill Cosby. We want to go back to our correspondent, Dre Clark. He is live outside of Cosby's house in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Good evening, Dre. What's the latest?
Well, Brittany, Bill Cosby, the man once known as America's dad, will sleep in his own bed tonight for the first time in 3 years here. Certainly after word came down of his release, cameras and neighbors and curious people surrounded his estate here in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous comedian and actor. And Bill Cosby did come out a little earlier today. This is video of him walking up his driveway with his lawyers by his side. Of course, Cosby was convicted in 2018 on multiple sexual assault counts, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his decision today and ordered his immediate release. They say that essentially because Cosby made a deal in 2005 on allegations that he should not have been prosecuted in 2018, and because of that, they allowed him to come home to his family. His sentence has been vindicated and vacated. Brittany?
They said they fought hard for this, and now that sentence has been overturned. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this special coverage of Bill Cosby, his conviction overturned. The Mark Lamont Hill is next. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brittany Jones. Have a good night.